Hello and welcome to Edupedia World. Today we will be going into the fourth part of human resource management, which is compensation. And we would be specifically discussing on how to design and establish strategic pay plans. So once you appraise and coach your employees, they will expect to be paid. Of course, few firms just pay employees arbitrarily. And each employee's pay should make sense in terms of what other employees earn. And this requires a pay plan. Now, the main purpose of this chapter is to show you how to establish a pay plan. And I will explain job evaluation, techniques to find the relative worth of a job, and how to conduct online and offline salary surveys. Now, employee compensation refers to all forms of pay going to employees and arising from their employment. It has two main components. One is direct financial payments. So that is usually wages, salaries, incentives, commissions, and bonuses. And the second is indirect financial payments. And these typically mean financial benefits like employer-paid insurance and leave travel concession and so on. So in turn, there are two basic ways to make direct financial payments to employees. Base them on increments of time or on performance. Time-based pay is still the foundation of most employers' pay plans. Blue-collar and clerical workers get hourly or daily wages. And others, like managers or web designers, tend to be salaried and paid by the week, month, or year. Our second direct payment option is to pay for performance. Piecework is an example. It ties compensation to the amount of production or number of pieces the worker turns out. So for instance, you divide a worker's target hourly wage by the standard number of units he or she is to produce in an hour. Then for each unit he or she produces, the person earns the calculated rate per piece. And sales commissions are another example of performance-based compensation. Now, compensation scenario in India. Now, employee compensation systems around the world operate within the framework of legislations. Fair compensation for work is an integral component of decent work, as defined by the International Labour Organization. In India, too, various legislations influence structure, computation, and payment of compensation. In general, only the non-managerial level of employees and a section of workers in the informal sector of the Indian economy are covered by the wage legislations. Now, the wage legislations are central acts, but states have the freedom to make suitable amendments without diluting the essence of the central legislation. Now, the important wage-related legislations in India are the Minimum Wages Act of 1948, the Payment of Wages Act of 1936, the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, and so on. So we would be discussing some of the acts which are kind of important to have knowledge of. So coming to the minimum wage in India. So this is fixed both by the central and state governments following the provisions of the Minimum Wage Act 1948. Though the act is a central legislation, many states have made amendments to suit their specific circumstances. So tripartite committees are set up both in the central and state governments to fix the minimum wage at regular intervals. And the wage is fixed only with respect to scheduled employments. And workers are eligible for overtime for extra work. But if the employer is unable to provide work for normal hours, the worker should be paid in full. And minimum wage notifications are issued by the Labour Ministry or the Department of Central or State Governments from time to time. So employers are required to consult labour offices to obtain information about the charges. Then we have the Companies Act of 1956, and this act sets the framework for remuneration of top management of Indian companies. So till 1991, an upper ceiling of rupees 15,000 per month existed for top managerial remuneration. Similarly, there were caps on profit sharing and prerequisites payable. And these limits were later relaxed. So, under Section 198 of the Act, the total remuneration payable to directors, including MDs and whole time directors of publicly listed companies in any financial year, should not exceed 11% of the net profits of the company. And further, Section 309 of the Act requires the Board of Directors to fix the remuneration of directors. So, the Remuneration Committee, one of the subcommittees of the Board of Directors of the firm, has a task of playing a key role in determining the salary structure of whole-time directors and senior management personnel. Then we come to the Employee Stock Option Scheme and the Employee Stock Purchase Scheme. So the ESOS and ESPS are regulated by the guidelines issued by the Securities Exchange Board of India, SEBI, otherwise known as. So SEBI has issued guidelines under Clause 11 of the SEBI Act 1992 to this effect. And stock options to employees are popular in the IT sector, with Infosys being an example of creating millionaire employees, including company drivers. But the volatility of the stock market and accounting issues forced Infosys and others to suspend the ESOP at one point of time. Later, seeing many millionaire employees leave the company, Infosys considered replacing the ESOPs with long tenure linked bonus payment, and public sector employees are given ESOPs during disinvestment of the PSU shares in the open market. Then we have other legislations regarding compensation in India. Basically, these legislations provide for social security to workers in the form of employee provident fund scheme, family pension, healthcare, and insurance. And these are provided by the Employee State Insurance Corporation. So by law, formal sector workers are eligible for gratuity and also for an annual bonus. And the legislation also provides compensation for workers who are affected by accidents out of and in the course of employment. Then we have the Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme. This is to provide social security to people living below the poverty line. And the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act is a highly popular scheme aimed at providing guaranteed wage employment for 100 days per financial year to a rural household. So the MNREG Act 2005 stipulates payment of declared minimum wages and equal payment to both men and women engaged for work under the scheme. Then we have the corporate policies, competitive strategy, and compensation. So the compensation strategy sets a clear guidance for the key remuneration policies in the company. And the strategy defines key strategic behaviors and values which are remunerated. So it defines the values and behaviors that are valued and rewarded. So a compensation is structured based on these two factors. That is basically the strategic behaviors and the strategic values. And the HR or the compensation manager, along with the top management, creates pay policies that are consistent with the firm's strategy aims. Now, the compensation strategy has these three specific key components. So first is the pay, and generally the higher pay can attract skilled employees and reduce turnover if aligned with right values. And the right pay depends on key values and behavior the company would want to reward. So that depends on your core values and the policies that you want to implement in your company. Most successful companies do not use the competitive pay as the advantage. They set the proper mixture of the pay, benefits, and career opportunities. So it's always better to mix the three when you provide a compensation or when you work on a compensation strategy. So changes to pay are quick to implement, but they can become extremely costly to companies. So you need to think before you decide, you want to be a high paying employer. Then comes the benefits. The attractive benefits package can be a real competitive advantage. And if benefits offered are aligned with the corporate culture and values of the company and employees, then it becomes even better. So the company has to define its strategy for benefits. It is simple to lay one benefit over another and, basically give out 100 benefits, but the company has to manage costs of providing benefits, and it has to define its core benefits, which will be used as the basis of building the competitive advantage. And flexible benefits are usually seen as the best alternative, but the company loses the option to put its corporate extra into the package. So benefits do not increase the satisfaction of employees, but they are important when the employee considers another job offer. And benefits can be used as a great reward and recognition tool as well. The third component, which is the careers, they represent the future value to employees of staying with the company. And the opportunity to learn and grow is highly valued by many employees. And the proper career management is also a strong cost management tool for the company. And careers are always connected with the strong performance management process and also with succession planning processes. And many companies do offer specialized career opportunities, and they let employees leave after a limited period of time. The position, weight of the career management in the reward mix depends on the industry and the mixture of employees. So when you are creating a compensation strategy, you also need to understand the kind of industry you're in, the kind of company you're in, and the kind of employees that you would be hiring. And of course, your vision, your mission, and the core values of your company. Now, when it comes to compensation policies, there are multiple issues that you need to take care of when creating it. So, one is whether to emphasize seniority or performance, right? Another is how do you distinguish between high and low performers in a related policy issue. And another issue is salary compression. How do you handle salary compression? That's a key policy issue. And salary compression means longer term employee salaries are lower than those of workers entering the firm today. And this is because of inflation. So prices and starting salaries go up faster than the company's salaries, and firms need a policy to handle it. So on the one hand, you don't want to treat current employees unfairly or to have them leave with their expertise. And however, mediocre performance, not salary compression, may explain some low salaries. So one policy is to install a more aggressive merit pay program. And other policies allow supervisors to recommend equity adjustments for selected employees who are highly valued victims of pay compression. Another thing to account for is geographic differences in cost of living, and another big pay policy issue. So, for example, the average base pay of an executive secretary ranges from $37,000 in New Mexico to $42,000 in Florida, and to $60,000 in California. So in India too, the compensation level varies between cities, and compensation levels in bigger or type 1 cities like Mumbai, Delhi and Bengaluru are higher than the smaller cities. And to manage employment costs, many IT companies have established units in smaller cities where the compensation packages are at a lower level. So cities like Ahmedabad, Jaipur, Coimbatore, Bhubaneswar, etc. have attracted firms owing to lower compensation levels. So Employers handle cost of living differentials in several ways. One is to give the transferred person a non recurring payment, usually in a lump sum or perhaps spread over 1 to 3 years. Others pay a differential for ongoing costs in addition to a one time allocation. And others simply raise the employee's base salary. So, firms in India include an additional component in the salary termed as city compensatory allowance to defray the higher living costs in cities. And since housing-related expenses vary across locations, the house rent allowances, that is the HRA, differs across Indian cities. Now, the problem is more complicated when you're sending employees overseas, and most multinational companies set expatriate salaries according to their home country base pay. Next, we have equity and its impact on pay rates. Before we go ahead and discuss the forms of compensation equity, let's understand what equity theory of motivation means. So, the equity theory of motivation postulates that people are strongly motivated to maintain a balance between what they perceive as their inputs or contributions and their rewards. And equity theory states that if a person perceives an inequity, a tension or drive will develop in the person's mind, and the person will be motivated to reduce or eliminate the tension and perceived inequity. Now, what this basically means is, if I have to give you an example, now if I call you forward and ask you to write a word on the blackboard, right? Say a word like human. You write that, right? HUMAN on the blackboard, and I gave you a 5 rupees dairy milk. What would your first reaction be, right? You would be elated. You would be so happy. Oh, that was a simple task and I got rewarded with a chocolate. Now I call the person next to you and ask him or her to do the exact same thing, which is write the word human on the blackboard. And then I give this person a 10 rupee dairy milk. Now compare the reaction that you had when I gave you the 5 rupee dairy milk, and then I gave this person a 10 rupee dairy milk for the exact same job that you did, right? So you are obviously going to think, hey, I did the exact same thing, and why did I get a smaller piece of chocolate? So that's basic human nature, and that is something which you need to look into when structuring or establishing a pay rate for your employees. So with respect to compensation, managers should address 4 forms of equity: external, internal, individual, and procedural. Now, external equity refers to how a job's pay rate in one company compares to the job's pay rate in other companies. Internal equity refers to how fair the job's pay rate is when compared to other jobs within the same company. So, for instance, is a sales manager's pay fair when compared to what the production manager is earning? The third, which is individual equity, refers to the fairness of an individual's pay as compared with what his or her co-workers are earning for the same or very similar jobs within the company. And procedural equity refers to the perceived fairness of the processes and procedures used to make decisions regarding the allocation of pay. Now, how do we address these equity issues, right? So managers use various methods to address each of these equity issues. So for example, they use salary surveys, and that is to monitor and maintain external equity. They use job analysis and job evaluation comparisons of each job to maintain internal equity. And they use performance appraisal and incentive pay to maintain individual equity. And they use communications, grievance mechanisms, and employees' participation in developing the company's pay plan to help ensure that employees view the pay process as transparent and procedurally fair. Now, establishing pay rates. The process of establishing pay rates while ensuring external, internal, and to some extent procedural equity consists of 5 steps. One is to conduct a salary survey of what other employees are paying for comparable jobs. So this is to help ensure external equity. Now, it's difficult to set pay rates if you don't know what others are paying. So salary surveys of what others are paying play a big role in pricing jobs. So virtually every employer conducts at least an informal telephone or newspaper or internet salary survey. And employers use salary surveys in three ways. First, they use survey data to price benchmark jobs. The benchmark jobs are the anchor jobs around which they slot their other jobs. Second, employers typically price 20% or more of their positions directly in the marketplace, based on a formal or informal survey of what comparable firms are paying for comparable jobs. Third, surveys also collect data on benefits like insurance, sick leave, and vacations to provide a basis for decisions regarding employee benefits. So salaries can be formal or informal, salary surveys. So informal phone or internet surveys are good for checking specific issues. The other way is also commercial and professional and government salary surveys. And most employers use these surveys published by consulting firms, professional associations, or government agencies. So we could use different survey reports that are provided by, say, the Society for Human Resource Management or the Financial Executives Institute published surveys of compensation practices among members of the associations. And then using the internet to do compensation surveys. This is a rapidly expanding array of internet-based options, and you could make use of various internet websites like salary.com or wageweb.com or Paycheck India, that is paycheck.in. Our second point is to determine the worth of each job in your organization through job evaluation. Right? Job evaluation aims to determine a job's relative worth, and the job evaluation is a formal and systematic comparison of jobs to determine the worth of one job relative to another. And job evaluation eventually results in a wage or salary structure or hierarchy. And the basic principle of job evaluation is this: jobs that require greater qualifications, more responsibilities, and more complex job duties should receive more pay than jobs with lesser requirements. Now, the third point is to group similar jobs into pay grades, right? What does this mean? So once the committee has used job evaluation to determine the relative worth of each job, it can turn to the task of assigning pay rates to each job. However, it will usually want it to first group jobs into pay grades. And of course, it could just assign pay rates to each individual job. But for a large employer, such a plan would be difficult to administer, since there might be different pay rates for hundreds or even thousands of jobs. So therefore, the committee will probably group similar jobs in terms of their ranking or number of points, for example, into grades for pay purposes. So instead of having to deal with hundreds of pay rates, it might only have to focus on, say, 10 or 12. So say if you're hiring a financial analyst, you could group that into basically various grades, right? Based on the kind of experience the person comes with and the kind of skill sets the person comes with. Next step is to basically price each pay grade by using wave curves. Of course, if you choose not to slot jobs into pay grades, you would have to assign individual pay rates to each individual job. And you'll typically use a wage curve to help assign pay rates to each pay grade. So the wage curve shows the pay rates currently paid for jobs in each pay grade relative to the points or rankings assigned to each job or grade by the job evaluation. The purpose of the wage curve is to show the relationships between the value of the job, right, and also the current average pay rates for your grades. So first, so how do you price jobs with a wage curve? So first, find the average pay for each pay grade, since each of the pay grade consists of several jobs. And next, plot the average pay rate for each pay grade, and then draw a line, which is a flat line called a wage curve, to the points just plotted. And you can do this freehand or by using a statistical method. And finally, price the jobs. So for this, wages along the wage line are the target wages, or the salary rates for the job in each pay grade. And if the current rates being paid for any of your jobs or grades fall well above or below the wage line, raises or a pay freeze for that job may be something that you may want to consider. The fifth step is to fine-tune your pay rates, and fine-tuning involves two parts, which is developing pay ranges, and second is correcting out-of-line rates. So most employers do not pay just one rate for all jobs in a particular pay grade. So for example, GE Medical won't want to pay all its accounting clerks from beginners to long tenure at the same rate. Instead, employers develop vertical pay ranges for each of the horizontal pay grades. And these pay ranges often appear as vertical boxes within each grade, showing minimum, maximum, and midpoint pay rates for that grade. And specialists call this graph a wage structure. Pricing managerial jobs and professional jobs. A compensation for a company's top executives usually consists of four main elements. One is the base pay, then we have the short-term incentives, the long-term incentives, and the executive benefits or perquisites or perks. Base pay includes the person's fixed salary as well as often guaranteed bonuses, such as 10% of pay at the end of the fourth fiscal quarter. The second is short-term incentives, and these are usually cash or stock bonuses for achieving short-term goals, such as year-to-year increases in sales revenue. Then we have the long-term incentives, and this aim to encourage the executive to take actions that drive up the value of the company's stock and include things like stock options. And these generally give the executive the right to purchase stock at a specific price for a specific period. And finally, executive benefits and perks might include supplemental executive retirement pension plans and supplemental life insurance and health insurance without a deductible or co-insurance. So for top executive jobs, especially the CEO, job evaluation typically has little relevance. And one recent study concluded that three main factors, as you can see on the slide, basically determine the executive pay. So one is the job complexity. Now this means the span of control, the number of functional divisions over which the executive has direct responsibility, and the management level. The second is the employer's ability to pay, so total profit and rate of return. And the third is the human capital, which is the educational level, field of study, and the work experience that the executive has. And this basically accounted for about 2/3 of the executive compensation variance. So in reality, CEO pay is set by the board taking into account a variety of factors such as the business strategy, corporate trends, and most importantly, where they want to be in the short and long term. Now we come to competency-based pay. In brief, competency-based pay means the company pays for the employee's range, depth, and types of skills and knowledge, rather than for the job title he or she holds. And experts variously call this competence, knowledge, or skill-based pay, right? And Another approach is to express competencies in terms of measurable behavior, such as design a website. And here you could identify the job's required competencies by completing the phrase, in order to perform this job competently, the employer should be able to, and continue what those competencies are. And we can simply define competencies as demonstrable knowledge, skills, or behaviors that enable performance. So in practice, competency-based pay usually comes down to using one or both of two basic types of pay programs. So pay for knowledge or skill-based pay. And pay for knowledge pay plans reward employees for learning organizationally relevant knowledge. So for instance, Microsoft pays new programmers more as they learn the intricacies of Windows operating system. And skill-based pay tends to be used more for workers with manual jobs. For example, carpenters, they earn more as they become more proficient at finishing cabinets. The biggest difference between a traditional and competency-based pay is that traditional job evaluation-based pay plans tie the worker's pay to the worth of the job based on the job description, and the pay here is more job-oriented. And competency-based pay ties the worker's pay to his or her competencies, and pay is more person-oriented. So why use competency-based pay, right? The main reason is that traditional pay plans may actually backfire if a high-performance work system is your goal. So the whole thrust of these systems is to encourage employees to work in a self-motivated way. And employers do this by organizing the work around teams, by encouraging team members to rotate freely among jobs, and by pushing more responsibility for things like day-to-day supervision down to the workers, and by organizing work around projects or processes where jobs may blend or overlap. So in such systems, you obviously want employees to be enthusiastic about learning and moving among other jobs. We've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed it. We would be discussing a little bit more on the compensation subject in the next session, and we will be discussing in detail on benefits and services. Thank you and have a good day.